Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Don't Praise the Machine. This is the internet's #1 comedy podcast where a lawyer and a DJ chat about the ways technology is changing culture and so much more. I'm one of your hosts. I go by the name Alexander, Apricot Pepsi Holland, and I'm sitting in Berlin, Germany, with me today as he is every single week. Down there in deep down dirty Melbourne town, it's the #1 tenured professor of podcasting. He's got to be the one called
John Junior Boost Maloney.
John Junior Boost Maloney. What do you think of my new intro there? Tightening up the branding of the podcast as we invite in more and more new listeners to the show, and we really want them to know what they can expect if they spend the next 45 minutes to 1 hour with these two guys.
These two guys. Yeah, I liked it. I think it's as cogent as anything I've been able to come up with, and I think people know when they see me in a jumper and a collared shirt that I've just come home from teaching, because I really am a professor.
That is
of
true.
Sorts. Not in the sense that I've earned that title, but I like to sometimes wear my professorial uniform so that I can be in character as the #1 tenured professor of podcasting.
Are you a lecturer? Can I say that? What do I call
You're
a university lecturer.
Yeah. I've got now a permanent position as a lecturer at the University of Melbourne Law School.
Oh, wow. I wanted you to also know that I am not saying lawyer to downplay your barista status. The only reason that I've put lawyer is because that's just more universally understood. And even people in the UK and Australia, I mean, we got a lot of dumbasses that tune into us every week. We got a real low bar down here of listeners.
Sure.
So even if I was to say to our Australian listeners, my co-host is a barrister, we've got a lot of nongs who are just going to go, I don't have any idea what that is. I'm tuning out.
Can you make me a flat white?
Can you make me a flat white? Why is that relevant? DJ and a guy that makes coffee. So that's why I've said lawyer, just so you know I'm not trying to ensmall you and your achievements.
My embiggened career as a lawyer.
Exactly. You're back from Singapore. You're in Singapore.
I'm back from Singapore. Yeah, the last time we recorded was in Singapore, wasn't it? So I came back and I said to everyone, I know that you think democracy is good, but I'm going to ask you to think about why, because a lot of things don't work here and we could fix them.
John, how many homeless people did you see in Singapore?
Yeah, very, very, very few. And maybe that's because they were shoved under bridges into temporary accommodation. I don't know. I don't want to know.
Tents?
All I know is I had a nice time. Yeah.
Tent cities under
bridges? I did see a lot of it's funny actually because one of the things that stands out, because it's so squeaky clean and everything's kind of quite orderly and everything's very sort of pro-social, like you can imagine if you went down the street screaming at everyone to go fuck themselves, you'd probably run into trouble.
Yeah.
But the one exception to that is sex work, which is quite out in the open in Singapore. So I was in an area earlier in the night where I got dropped off by a Grab, which is their kind of Uber, and then I returned to the same spot at maybe like 11 o'clock at night, and there was just a row of sex workers hanging out looking very casual, because apparently Lee Kuan Yew was like, look, I get it, people have vices and I don't mind, just don't spit on anything.
Spit on anything.
That really irks me.
You can't chew gum, but I'll let you chew boobs.
Yeah, exactly. The only thing you should be hot touring on is that thing. Ain't no fine for hot tour in Singapore.
I wanted to say to you, first of all, you're looking great there in the YouTube, John. It's funny how we had a very brief technical session this morning because John is correct. He sent me a WhatsApp message that said this camera is so fucking complicated, and it's true. It is. You just get one setting wrong, and it makes you look like it's being filmed with the first version of like camera phones from 2009.
Of a camera. Yeah.
And then I just said I think it was like 2 settings that we had to change. We had to change the shutter speed and the white. It went from looking dreadful, you could barely see him, and he was all blue and sickly. And then all we had to do was change the white balance and maybe the shutter speed. And now it looks like you've worked with a cinematographer to get that shot.
It's funny, isn't it? If anyone out there has maybe a partner who is a photographer and you want a good tip, you've had a fight with them, you want to really give them the shits, just get in there deep, maybe like, page 109 of the settings, just change one of the settings and they're going to be tearing their nails out in frustration.
I was going to leave this until the end you've just reminded me of something that I want to get to. Before I do, can you tell me how far to your right is your Godox key light, John? Because you've got a beautiful deep shadow on one side of your face, which I've got shadow envy. There's 2 things of you I've got envy of. I've got penis envy and I've got facial shadow envy from you. These are my 2 envies.
Yeah.
I've got a little bit, but I'm wondering how far up.
Basically.
So you've got,
it's like, it's an arm's length away, and it is, I would say it's at 2:00.
I might angle mine a bit further away in future. You can see I've got quite a nice, but not quite as cinematic as yours. You've got that real Tarantino face.
Little chiaroscuro, as the art teacher would have said, on my face.
The thing that I had for the end of the podcast that you've reminded me of, because you were mentioning if you really wanted to mess with a partner, you just change one of their Sony camera settings and just don't tell them, and they'll just go quietly mad. Is that we spoke a few weeks ago about forgettable films, books, and plays that have accidentally birthed expressions / idioms which have entered the popular lexicon of language. And so we spoke about bucket list. Everybody knows what a bucket list is. Everybody knows that it's the list of things that you want to do before you die, before you kick the bucket. But you probably you'd have to have somebody explain to you that it even refers to the expression "kick the bucket," I assume. And nobody knows that it was this completely fucking forgettable film with Morgan Freeman and is it
Jack Nicholson?
Yeah, Jack Nicholson. And the other one we mentioned was
star of Chinatown and Bucket List,
and Joker from movie Joker. And then
about Schmidt.
Schmidt. And then we also talked about Sliding Doors from 1997 with Gwyneth Goopy Paltrow, where, and again, a film that nobody remembers, and then people mention they have sliding doors moments where your life could have gone one of 2 ways, and you ponder what the outcome could have been depending on which door, which moment you had. Sliding doors, referring to the sliding doors of London Underground's tube train that would have taken Goopy to her destination or left her at the station. So that's just a bit of background on what we spoke about.
Came
that
back
week.
and somebody was having an affair.
That's right. And it went, if only I could turn back time. Turn Back Time, the one song by Aqua that they wanted you to take seriously. Tough job for a novelty band to make like 1,200 syrupy bubblegum tracks and then just go, guys, this one's real. This one's real. This one's not for jokes.
Yeah, it reminds me of when the Bee Gees did that song, You Win Again. Is that what it's called? And it was kind of about the nature of life. And I thought,
no way.
Don't fucking lecture me about that. You guys write trash.
Disco trash. They didn't sing it in falsetto. Barry didn't.
Yeah, that's right.
It was like, the meaning of life is really interesting.
No, it was for kind of pensive, slow dancing rather than for grooving on the dance floor with the Burgers.
So we spoke about that, and then we reached out to the audience and we said, does anybody have any other examples of expressions that are much more popular than the art or the creative channel through which they were birthed? And I had a couple of men write to me And just because these men have the same names as two of my cousins, don't think that. These are probably, I don't know who these guys are.
Just random people.
These are just random. We have hundreds of thousands of listeners. The fact that one of them is called Seb and one of them is called Henry, I didn't bother to look up their surnames. I'm assuming I've never met either of these two men before. Seb wrote in, and this is why this is why what you said about the camera settings, John, reminded me of this. Seb wrote in and said the term gaslight.
Of course. Yeah.
So are you? I've got the genesis of gaslight or gaslighting here, John. So were you?
Yeah.
Do you know this off the top of your head?
Well, I know that it. I think it might be based on. I know there was a kind of oldie movie about it, which itself might have been based on a play. I
Correct.
think. And in fact, the play Gaslight is showing in Melbourne at the moment, which is why I know that.
Yeah, so you're correct. So for anybody who doesn't know, the term gaslighting is essentially exactly what John was just mentioning, with the partner tricking their cameraman partner into or camerawoman partner into thinking something's gone real wrong because one setting has been changed on their camera and they don't remember changing it and they're going crazy. So gaslighting means to basically make somebody question reality by asserting over them a certain type of almost like reality power framing, where you just bulldoze ahead and tell them, no. What do you mean this setting has been changed on your camera? You're crazy, and you just unrelentingly tell them some untruth to the point where they start questioning their own grasp of reality and their own memory. And so the term gaslighting was coined from the 1938 British play called Gaslight, in which a husband manipulates a wife into thinking she's crazy by slyly changing the intensity of the gas lights in their home when she is left alone. He does this in an attempt to make her believe that she cannot trust herself or her memory. So thanks, Seb, for that one. That's an absolute classic, and one
that is a classic.
One that has become very popular in Gen Z language as well. You always hear about,
he's
gaslighting me, she's gaslighting me.
Anytime I give a student a less than desirable grade, I get that. I get an email saying, you've gaslit me.
This is a perfect essay. Making me question my own abilities. There should have been a high distinction and you've given me a fail.
Exactly. This passing grade is a microaggression, etc.
The second one comes from definitely not a relative of mine, Henry Schultz. And Henry, I think Henry wrote this to me. I think this was Henry wrote, and this one I actually didn't know was much more recent than it is. Are you familiar with? I mean, you'd surely be familiar with the expression Debbie Downer. If somebody is a Debbie Downer. What would you say that means, John?
They're like a kind of a negative, a killjoy sort of person, basically.
It's like a party pooper, you could almost say.
A party pooper, exactly.
So I thought Debbie Downer was just something that had been around for, 60, 70, 80, 100 years.
Yeah, me too.
The term dates to 2004 and an eponymous, what does the word eponymous mean, John, again?
So like the eponymous character in Willow is Willow. Basically.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Thank you. That makes sense. The term dates to 2004 and an eponymous Saturday Night Live sketch in which Rachel Dratch plays a woman who snuffs the light out of every conversation with reports and reminiscences that are indeed total downers. So she plays a character. I almost can't believe I looked this up. And even as I'm saying this to you now, a part of my brain is going, this can't be right. Like, that can't be the genesis of Debbie Downer. But I think it is, which is crazy. That's 20 years old, only 20 years old from Saturday Night Live. That's why people say Debbie Downer.
I've seen this. I've seen some of Rachel Dratch's sketches where
she's great, yeah.
She just like sidles up to people at work and then says like, my doctor says I can't have children or something.
Man, I totally know those people. We speak so much about on the podcast about just how to just be sort of generally socially normal. And I'm constantly amazed when you hang out with people that just think like it's because it's funny how people's brains, you know, people when they're trying to have a nice conversation that flows, people understand you have to say things that are like related to what the other person has said. So it's not a total non sequitur, but you'll have people that just, they obviously have a range. You'll say something that's made them think of a range of topics and they don't. The next step that is really important is to not pick the one that's terrible to talk about. And so many times I've been with somebody and I've said something like, "Oh man, I was out the other day and I just saw the most beautiful dog that I've seen. I was so fluffy and cute." And they'll go, "Oh yeah, I saw a dog get hit by a car the other day, and the owner was just distraught, and it was absolutely horrible and traumatic. And it, the owner was with their 5-year-old, and the 5-year-old saw the dog." And I'm just going, "You've missed the next bit. It's a 2-part process. You find the relatable story, and then you filter for ones that are not dreadful, please."
Yeah, there's got to be a bit of tonal continuity. It can't just be literal. It's like an AI mistake. This is also dog story. Well, it's not really not really what's called for here.
And
you could even tell a tonally similar story about a cat, but the point is more the vibe.
The tone,
not so much.
The tone is more important.
Subject being a dog.
It would be much better to say I have an unrelated but pleasant. It's totally unrelated, but it is a pleasant. You know, it could be something about a cute baby, anything. Don't just.
That'd be great though if you were like, I've got a story. It's got a different subject, but it'll keep this vibe that you've created going.
Yeah,
it's about a cat.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, thanks.
I love it. Viberidin. We call that.
Viberidin. Yeah, that's right.
And you could even say, "Guys, I'm just going to ride the vibe here," and people would understand what you meant and go, "Yeah, just stick on that. Just stick on that vibe."
I ran over a dog in my car the other day, and it was the best.
Everyone starts high-fiving. Yeah, Gary's vibe riding, and then. The next thing that I had on my list, John, is just that, again, we're always looking for reasons to get people to pop over to the YouTube channel and just hit subscribe. As I've dropped in earlier, John's looking beautiful and cinematic because his key light is a slightly more extreme right angle than mine. And the second thing is that I have shaved my face for the first time since we've been filming the podcast, revealing what lay hidden beneath for centuries.
I've got to tell you, you are looking youthful. I'm quite jealous.
Stop it.
Yeah, you've got some real delicate skin, as they say, underneath us.
I do it every couple of years just to do a general jowl check because it's just important to see what level of jowling that you're at, and if it gets too extreme, then I get my cosmetic surgeon to just do a couple of incisions, put a little bit of dental floss here, tie knots, and then just tie it behind my ears. So that gives me a little
tighten up. Yeah, I did it a few years ago, and I think she was like a kid whose parent has a haircut and they just can't, like you see those videos where the dad shaves the beard and then the little baby comes in and like freaks out because she's sort of like, "That's my dad," but it's not. And that was more or less how Sent responded to beard. She was like, "That's fine, but you need to grow it back ASAP."
Yeah.
So it stayed that way, but I think it might be time. I mean, I used to have a beard in part because it made me look like a mature man, and now I'm like, I've come out the other side. I'm thinking I need to look less mature than I am.
Yeah.
I do everything I can.
I think for me, I shaved clean about 4 or 5 days ago, and I've just started to get a bit of visible stubble coming back. And this is much better for me. I did not like the total smooth. It made me look like Heidi Klum when she dressed up like a worm for Halloween.
This is too smooth. Yeah, I always feel as though it just takes a while to get used to having extra face. You feel like you've grown some growth on your cheek that you're not used to seeing. But you look good.
Thanks, man. I mean, unless you have a really angular face, which most people don't, just handsome modeling boys or boys that have been mewing or chewing jaws size for years, then most people have a slightly rounded bottom half of their face. And, you know, unless you have quite low body fat, you tend to also not have that much definition in your face. And if you are completely clean shaven, then there's much less of a distinction between your head and your neck. So that's what you confront when you shave. Everything is you just all sort of melt in to your neck.
Especially as you get older.
That's what all my friends said to me when I said, guys don't look so handsome. And they said, you both, two things. You look like the Heidi Klum worm, and it looks like your head's melted into your neck. And I said,
look like a candle that's been left lit for too long.
Are you guys really my friends? I said.
I think it's good. I think it suits you.
Thanks,
I think a bit of stubs is perfect, actually.
Yeah, just gives it slight definition and slight man.
Yeah.
Vibes.
So everyone, if you're looking for maybe a bit of anything from a bit of style tip to a sexual thrill, I urge you to watch the YouTube and just get a load of Al's new face, because it's really something.
The thing I had first here on the notes, John, was talking about a lot of the developments that are happening in language translation and computing and AI, as I mentioned to you just briefly before the show. There's so much that's happening at the moment in the world of language, exchanging one language to another in real time has been, I mean, think about what's it called? Is it the Babel fish in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Wasn't that some sort of technology that would instantly, I mean, this has been a sci-fi dream for as long as you can remember, being able to speak into a device in real time and then have it translate exactly what you mean into a language that you don't speak, that somebody else does and understands. So you could, and I mean, I have a feeling that we probably are there already behind closed doors in some of these AI places like OpenAI and stuff, because OpenAI just released something this week. I think they just released ChatGPT 4 point something, and I think that has brought new language translation capabilities. The thing with that I'm particularly interested, that I saw a TikTok video about, was them saying that there was a demo with one of the OpenAI women, I think, and she was showing how she wanted to basically learn or improve her Mandarin Chinese.
Right.
And so she told ChatGPT, hey, ChatGPT, I'm learning Mandarin. I want to have a conversation with you, and I want you to correct me if I make mistakes. And then I think she's a native Chinese speaker, this woman, but she deliberately, and ChatGPT said, yeah, go for it. No worries. And so she said a few things to it, and it spoke back to her in Mandarin, and then she deliberately made a mistake, and it said, oh, by the way, let me just correct you there. And for me, as a person who's trying to learn German all the time and improve my German, I just thought this would be absolutely incredible, because if I could wake up and tell an AI like ChatGPT, hey, I just want to practice my German for an hour, I would have somebody that could, something that could I could speak German to. It would speak back, and you could tell it how much.
That's amazing.
How much you wanted it to correct you, because to be honest, I wouldn't want it to correct all of my German mistakes right now, because we wouldn't get anywhere. So you could say to it, hey, ChatGPT, I just want to have a German conversation with you. Can you just speak perfect German at an intermediate level, and at an intermediate pace, and I will do the same thing. And I could literally spend half an hour a day improving my spoken German and comprehension. And because ChatGPT would be replying in perfect German, you'd be having the same experience as if you were having an immersive language experience, which is bananas.
Yeah, that's nuts. And then it would it would change it in English if it needed to give you detailed feedback.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
That's great.
then the other thing that I've had on my list for a while to talk about with you, which I think is super exciting.
Yeah.
People might have seen that probably in the last 18 months, I think. 18 months ago, I think was the first time I saw this, where there was a particular company that released a technology where you could take a pre-existing video, like let's say it's a video of Michael Jackson talking in an interview. Obviously, Michael Jackson's dead. He's incapable of learning any more languages. This interview might be from 1996. And what this technology allowed you to do is take that Michael Jackson video, analyze it with the AI language platform, and then say, I want Michael Jackson to speak German. And it would be able to listen to what he'd said, translate it into virtually perfect German, and then use all of these other technologies to, sample his voice tone and then have him speak in his own voice tone and accent, but in German. And then this final layer of technology where it's obviously analyzed his face and particularly his mouth, and it's overlaid the German speaking mouth. So it looks like he's really speaking German. And I think the first time I saw this was 18 months ago. And instantly you just think, man, the implications of this are...
Yeah, that's wild.
Are nuts. And maybe go on.
And all of the... people who, for example, the Spanish Bart Simpson will be just like, well, that's the end of my career because there's no need. Yeah. You can just have Nancy Cartwright do it and then they'll just copy her voice and change it into Spanish or Chinese or whatever. But the first time I saw it, I think, was when I was on YouTube in some sort of weird history rabbit hole, and I saw this clip of Hitler, and then it converted him mid-speech into speaking English, which was really amazing because you got this kind of sense of, I got a sense of his kind of power as an orator and and the way that he would have come across as an orator if he spoke English, which I'd never had access to before because I don't speak German. So, yeah, that was wild. And I thought anyway, it doesn't matter. I had some views shift after that.
Yeah,
we don't need to go
you
into.
Thought, I don't really. I was particularly judgmental of how easily swayed the Germans were until I heard how convincing and charismatic he was in English.
I was like, this guy leaves Churchill for dead speech wise.
That clip is incredible, and it's very similar to the way that when you see black and white film colorized, or where we're now in this era where not only can black and white film be colorized, but can be upscaled to a much higher resolution, and it can be, there might be a rickety old film that was bloody 10 frames a second instead of just a little bit of cinema technical knowledge for you here, everybody. If you're watching a cinematic film, that's 24 frames per second. Me and John are coming to you live on YouTube in 30 frames per second. And if you want that really weird, smooth look, that's 60 frames per second, which not a lot of people use because it looks a little bit too smooth and weird. But what people have been doing is taking rickety old films that are 10 and 15 frames per second from 120 years ago and upscaling them with computers to 60 frames per second and then improving the quality of them and then colorizing them, and it makes you feel so much closer to the people.
Yeah,
you relate to them so much more than you ever did before. We've mentioned before. I think probably the most wonderful example and enchanting example of it is the French snowball fight. Because I think we're so prone to assuming that people in dusty old times were very buttoned down and boring. We live in these exciting, crazy, liberal, silly times, but 120 years ago, people were dying of illnesses very young. It was just depressing. Nobody had any cool phones to keep them interested. And then you see, I'll put it up on screen now if anybody wants to check at the YouTube, this video of the French snowball fight.
Yeah. And you're right, because you see these people who because they're at a time when you had to pose for ages to sit for a photograph, and they look, quite, and I guess they treated it like a portrait. So they look quite composed and serious, and you think somehow, I mean, obviously you can't help but think that they must have been that way. But then this is kind of catching them in a very joyful and unguarded moment. And I remember this video that you showed me, which I think we talked about ages ago on the podcast, which was from Wuppertal. Is that how you pronounce the town?
Yeah,
in Germany.
Wuppertal.
Wuppertal, and it's like an air rail, basically, like a kind of rail that a rail system that works by hanging from a train from a kind of cable system, essentially. And it's still there, but it's a video that somebody made in, or a motion picture that somebody made in 1903 or something like that. And you can just, because it's kind of driving around the town, you can see all these scenes and little people walking around and stuff. But to see that in this kind of smooth modern framing just made me feel like we were getting some bizarre window into the past, because those people seemed, all those things that kind of make you feel more remote from them, like the fact that they're sped up a little too much, or they're just a bit grainy or whatever, were wiped away, and you just felt like it was wild to be seeing that. But speaking of which, if I'm not interrupting the continuation of your story, I was just going to show, if you want, I have a couple of examples of the of the tech. Perhaps you might like to see Michael Jackson speaking Turkish. So if you do, I've just sent it to you on WhatsApp there, John. So if you want to raise your hand when it starts playing. Michael Jackson speaking Turkish. Great. Let me just have a look here.
Onunla çalışmak harika ve bana biraz sertlikle hoşlanacağım bir şarkı yazmamı söylediğini hatırlıyorum. Yani odama gittim ve onu yazdım. Nedenini bilmiyorum ama iki çetenin bir araya gelmesi hakkında bilirsin. Ve şarkı o kadar
Yeah, I mean, if you really look at the mouth, you kind of go, maybe there's something going on there. But if you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't. And also, if you didn't know that Michael Jackson probably didn't speak Turkish, you wouldn't be looking for it.
How about Billie Eilish speaking Spanish?
Great.
Olvidé agradecer a mi equipo de gira en el último. Quiero agradecerles por ayudarme a poner. Creo que los fanáticos merecen todo.
Wow.
No se ha hablado lo suficiente de ellos esta noche porque son la única razón por la que estamos aquí. Gracias.
Nice. Well done, Billie.
Well done for learning Spanish. And
yeah, I mean, she probably should.
And then this one is more impactful. So last year, I think it was last year, it could have been earlier this year, the Argentinian president, and I need to remember how to pronounce his name. It's Javier Milei.
Okay.
Javier Milei is an Argentinian politician and economist who has served as the president of Argentina since December 2023. So he's the one with the funky sideburns. So he gave a speech in Davos recently, and it got a lot of media attention because I think he said a bunch of things that just maybe Argentinian leaders hadn't said for a while. And I think people in I can't remember if he said stuff that was like particularly libertarian. There was a particular like group of people in the US, I think, have a particular political ideology, and they really latched onto this because I think he said a bunch of things. He wasn't really dilly-dallying, and he said a bunch of things that people thought, wow, this guy is really going to make some important changes because he's not a bullshit artist. But he gave the entire speech in Spanish because I don't even know if he speaks. I don't know what his level of English is, but he gave his speech in Spanish.
Right.
And so the first thing I'll send you here, John, is this is the original. So if you just watch that for 15, just particularly from the start when he starts talking.
Yeah.
So he's got his glasses on.
Buenas tardes. Muchas gracias. Hoy estoy acá para decirles que Occidente está en peligro. Está en peligro porque aquellos que supuestamente deben defender los valores de Occidente se encuentran cooptados por una visión.
Cool.
Got Milei
And
speaking
then-
Spanish.
And then somebody went and said, "Oh, you want to watch that whole thing in English with him speaking in his own tone of voice with a slight Spanish accent?" Well, I say, you got it.
Here we go. Well, it's the exact same footage. There you go.
Exact same footage.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Today I am present to inform you that the Western world is facing a significant threat. It is in danger because those who are supposed to defend the values of the Western world are co-opted by a worldview that inevitably leads to socialism and consequently to poverty and economic deprivation.
So as you're watching this, John, if I hadn't told you that he gave that speech in Spanish and I sent you this, you would think this is the speech. There's no
totally.
tell in this video that like his
No.
mouth is perfect. Everything
Yeah.
about this, you're going,
Also
I
'cause
didn't
he's-
realize that he could speak English.
Yeah. He's a little bit further away, which helps, I guess. But I remember when he actually sent me this. I think it was you. And it was a while ago, and I just thought it was him giving a speech in English. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, there's that guy. Didn't know he could speak English. You just
So-
wouldn't think of it.
Yeah, so language barriers are falling like the Berlin Wall in November 1989. And what that means for us, John, is that I wouldn't be surprised if this time next year people can watch the very video that we're doing now in whatever language they want. So we will upload this video to YouTube, and then YouTube will serve our video to a Spanish-speaking market, and then when they open it, it will just apply this technology so that you and I will be speaking Spanish when somebody watches a video of us in Barcelona, or if they want to switch, they can just switch to whatever language, and our mouths will move naturally.
Crazy.
So suddenly we have, I mean, what I'm thinking is maybe we're way funnier to the Portuguese. Maybe we're missing out on maybe Portugal and Brazil is really where the people are who are gonna support.
Totally.
I mean, this is what's gonna happen. This incredible thing is gonna happen where creators who operated in one language and had a certain level of success will explode in another territory that they could have never like Hindi or some shit. They've just suddenly got tons of Indian fans.
100%. Yeah. And then they'll go, I mean, it could be that people in other language groups will hear us and go, these guys are idiots because it just doesn't translate culturally.
That
which
would be my
its own
guess.
interesting experience.
Yeah.
But that's just as well because my grandfather didn't die in World War II for no reason, and I don't want to be talking a language other than English. He didn't die in World War II. I made that up. Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, it has so many implications, doesn't it? Also for learning materials, you know, like if you want to hear from the best person, the best expert or professor or whatever on a certain subject, but they only speak a certain language, or even if you want to teach in another country and you don't speak the language, well, then your students can probably just put on their Google glasses and you'll just instantly be translated.
Nice reference. Yeah, the old Google Glass from some years ago, but definitely something like that. But you're right. Previously, it would be, you want to teach in Japan. Well, you have to teach English in Japan. Now, you could teach maths in Japan. You could teach science in Japan. You could teach history in Japan. I actually went to the trouble of bringing up the most spoken languages on planet Earth, John, so you can tell me which of these you're super excited to be appreciated in. First of all, we got English is the most spoken language in the world. But this is the most spoken language by speakers. So people that speak this language is of a second language. It could be their second language as well. I think.
Oh, I see.
So we have 1.4 billion English speakers in the world.
Good numbers. Yeah.
Then 1.1 billion Chinese Mandarin.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have Hindi at 609 million. Then we have Spanish.
Coming in at number 4. Yeah.
Then we have Spanish, French, Arabic, Bengali, Portuguese, Russian, and Urdu are all languages.
There you go.
Personally, I'm looking forward to us busting out Tagalog.
Yeah,
Tagalog
can't wait for
thing.
that.
Because we've got a lot of Filipino fans that real want us. We're going to have Bruno Mars finally will listen into us. I've been waiting for that for so long, but he wouldn't listen to the English version of us.
Korean, Tamil. There's so many possibilities. Just naming languages, aren't I? I'm just reading that list though. Okay, that's interesting in itself because it's the number of speakers in total as opposed to.
I think so.
I think if you go the number of people whose first language is,
yes,
then it's Spanish is maybe first, etc. But and Chinese and things like that. English is not top of the range, but of course everyone has been compelled to learn English as a second language, which is just as well saves me having to act respectfully when I'm traveling around the world.
So that's all
anyone's customs.
That's all my bits, John. I'm fresh out of bits.
That's how we should signify the end of a bit. And that's me, fresh out of bits.
And that's all the homework that I did. I'm at the bottom of my .txt file.
.txt. Just splash out and get a Microsoft Office subscription, please. using Notepad. So yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things actually that I had on my docket for this week, but the thing that perhaps is worth talking about is this is very much language related, and that is that there's a number of fast food companies that have been trying to harness the language interpretation powers of AI, and it's kind of been an unsteady process. So apparently not too long ago, McDonald's, who was pairing with IBM to equip maybe a few thousand of its, drive-thrus with language AI, more than 1,000 apparently. Hang on, one sec. Yeah, so they paired with IBM. They had this system where they were trialing a bunch of drive-through setups so that people, you could drive in, you could just say, I'll have chicken nuggets and a Coke and a McFlurry, whatever, and then it wouldn't require a staff member to work at the drive-through. So, you get this further erosion, as we've alluded to previously on the show, of the traditional McDonald's restaurant, and instead you just have presumably a bunch of people in the kitchen who themselves will soon be replaced by robots. And there were famously a bunch of kind of embarrassing screw-ups that led to the cancellation of this deal that they'd made with IBM. So there was this TikTok video that got a lot of traction where people went to the drive-through to order some chicken McNuggets, and somehow it tallied up 260 chicken McNuggets, and just started it kept going up and up and up, and they were like screaming, stop, stop, stop. And then, and there's another one where somebody's trying to order a McFlurry or something, and it somehow adds bacon to the ice cream, etc. And at the moment, of course, it's all got training wheels on because there's human beings who are kind of supervising it. But the plan obviously is to sort of try and turn these processes over to mechanization as much as possible. But they pulled out of this deal with IBM and said, we're going to kind of keep exploring the space. And it seems like what they're doing is staying out of it until they have a good sense of what their competitors are doing, and then they might jump in, kind of let other people hit on the perfect formula. So you've got all these other companies like Wendy's, which has made a partnership with Google Cloud last year. You've got Carl's Jr. and Taco John's. I hadn't actually heard of Taco John's, that have hired Presto, which is a voice AI firm for restaurants. You've got Panda Express, which has about 30 automated order takers through a group called SoundHound AI. White Castle's also gone with SoundHound AI. And interestingly, I saw this article in the New York Times where they were interviewing this guy who was sort of interested in, I think he was at MIT. He was interested in kind of where this technology was going. And he was saying that SoundHound has also paired with or entered into research projects with a number of car manufacturers. And the idea is that you would, I guess, you're driving home. So you could be in a Kia, you could be in a Jeep. SoundHound has partnered with both of those companies, and you're driving home from work, and the car says to you, "Are you hungry?" And you go, "Oh yeah, I suppose I could eat." And then it says, "Well, maybe you'd like a burger. There's a Carl's Jr. coming up in 2 kilometers." And you go, "Oh yeah, right." And then, particularly I'd like the idea of this being a kind of like autonomous vehicle that then just like pulls you into the drive-through, having already maybe pre-ordered from Carl's Jr. So you just slow down. They just put your order through the window and off you go. So it's this kind of fairly creepy, vertical integration where your whole experience is just kind of a wraparound AI driven and obviously commercially driven experience where you can indulge your every burger related whim. So I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I mean, the sooner the better. I guess we may as well just hasten these things and see what happens. I mean, the thing that IBM seemed to be doing was using this kind of old school AI technology, or old school in relative terms, where it was using a kind of tree-like structure that was a bit more strict or a bit more rule-bound than kind of large language AI. So, you would say, "I want a Big Mac," and maybe it would have a series of options based on that request, like, do you want it without anything? Do you want to take away the pickle? Do you want to add more sauce? Whatever. But if you kind of broke the script and said something unusual, or had like a custom order, or you gave it a bunch of irrelevant, you just started chatting to it, then steam would start coming out of the machine's ears and it would kind of shit itself. Whereas like they're trying to get more, it's a bit like the equivalent of what's going on with automated vehicles, where it's, if you go off script, if you like, then it gets off the rails pretty quickly. But they're trying to get it better and better. But until then, I hope there's a few more hilarious capers where people order, bacon, ice cream, and 2,000 chicken McNuggets.
I've seen the Wendy's one. The Wendy's one.
Yeah.
There was a lot of Wendy's ones on TikTok that seemed fairly simple and successful. The person just goes up to the window and it just goes, "Hey, this is Wendy AI. Can I help you?" And you just go, "Yeah, I like a cheeseburger, Wendy AI." And then it goes, "Do you want fries with that?" And you go, "No, that's it." And then it understood people, I think, with quite heavy accents and stuff.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So it is very much like watch. It always reminds me of Back to the Future too.
Yeah, that's right. BBB for pork.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I don't know. I remember hearing a few years ago that China was the only country that had both hypersonic, whatever they're called, basically super fast trains, and also steam trains at the same time at different parts of its rail networks.
Okay.
And the world feels a little bit like that because you've got these kind of things that make you think we're living in the future, but then other people are sort of puttering around struggling with other aspects of this technology in a way that seems kind of embarrassingly behind the times. And even more so, how are we going for time? I might just drop this in. I found out during the week that Japan had recently declared victory in its war on floppy disks. And apparently post-COVID, a lot of people, well, I guess during COVID, a lot of people got sick finally of the fact that they had to kind of use floppy disks for a lot of basic processes. So there were something like 1,000 regulations in Japan that meant that if you wanted to submit some information to government, you had to do it on a floppy disk. And maybe some of them were being worked around in practice, but others weren't. And apparently there were still government departments where they were, running around carrying floppy disks, which amazed me, particularly because Japan was is a country that's sort of rightly or wrongly, seemingly perhaps wrongly, synonymous with being on the technological cutting edge. But yeah, there were, until this year, they were big into both. They've still got an issue with fax machines where they use too many faxes, and the government's keen to eradicate that. And they've got an issue with, which is just recently resolved, with using floppy disks. And you were telling me before the podcast that your understanding is that Germany also uses, I knew that Germany, for whatever reason, uses quite a few fax machines, and in fact seems to have increased the number of fax machines that it's used in recent years. But floppy disks apparently are still a thing in Germany, in some kind of arcane aspects of government process at least, which is wild.
Yeah, I've seen floppy disks updating the ticket machines in the train stations. I think particularly with government just spends money on this technology like 40 years ago and then just says we're not going to update it. Because there was something as well about the US nukes were still run off floppy disks.
That's right.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Which could actually end up being a clever security measure, because you can't hack the mainframe easily.
Yeah.
If it's all like offline, and you need to sort through that little plastic box sat on the desk that has the little floppy disks in it, for the one that says
exactly.
I have to find the nuke Moscow disk.
Yeah. Nuke disk 1 of 2. And it's you've got just like a security guard with a jangly set of keys. He's got to open the little disc box and hand you the correct disc. Yeah, that's one of the things that proponents of these old technologies say is like, well, when the kind of cyber attack to end all cyber attacks comes, you'll be glad that some of this shit is just analog and much safer
off the
but
network.
Of course, the flip side is, if you drop that disk in your coffee, then we can't use the nukes, and so it's a mixed bag. But yeah, fax machines are an amazing thing, because I still have to write, when I write a legal document, I still often have to put the fax machine number of my client, of my instructing solicitor, at the bottom of it. Sometimes I will conscientiously object to doing that, because I just think, don't be sending faxes. That is idiotic. And you reminded me before the show that there's a couple of famous kind of time loopy facts about fax machines, because it's such an old technology. Like, people sometimes say that Abraham Lincoln could have sent a fax to a samurai. That's how old faxes are.
The initial, like the initial basic technology.
Yeah, the initial basic technology, yeah. They would have both had to have fax machines, which they didn't, but still.
John, do you want to say to everybody, thanks for coming and good night?
Thanks for coming, everyone. If you
and
don't...
good night.
And good night. Sorry, yeah. Thought I was being given a bit of latitude to improvise there. I misunderstood the brief. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode, which of course is episode 171. And I think I speak for both of us when I say we can't wait to see you next week
at the podcast.